Hey, good evening, Delaware Action Church. How's it going? I'm so glad to be before you once again as we meditate through the season of Lent. Last week I shared with you that through Lent, Christians all over the world participate in some spiritual disciplines. And one of those disciplines is fasting. Fasting is really giving us something that we believe is important to us and replacing that thing that we believe that is important to us with God. It is giving something up in order to put God in its place, making God the center of our lives, our focus. There's always something taking God from the center of our lives, so fasting gives us the opportunity to put God in His appropriate place in our hearts, in our lives, especially through the season of repentance. I, Pastor Sam, through the season of Lent, I have made a commitment with me and with God to fast complaining. Yes, complaining. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 14, the Apostle Paul advises us in this way. Do all things without complaining or disputing. Wow. The Apostle Paul tells us, stop complaining, stop disputing. And if there's one area of my life that I need to work on, that often takes my gratitude away, gratitude for what God has done in my life, is complaining. Which reminds me of Israel. Every time I hear or think about or meditate on the word complaining, I think about God's people who prayed that God would take them out of Egypt. And as soon as God provided them with a beautiful miracle of freeing them from Egypt, and now they're free to go to the promised land that God has always promised them. In that journey, you know what they start to do? They start to complain. And listen what happens in Numbers, chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. This is what it says. And the people complained in the hearing of the Lord. They came before God and they started to complain to God about their misfortunes. And when the Lord heard it, His anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed the outer parts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses in despair, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So the name of that place was called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. Wow. Complaining never helped anyone find God. Let me say this again in a different form. Complaining never brought people closer to God. Actually, made God mad. God dislikes complaining. Now, as Christians, we need to make a difference, a distinction between lament and complaining. Because a lot of us equate lament with complaining. No, lament is about mourning. It's about being sorrow, about something. It's about grieving something. That's what lament is about. And we ought to lament. There's a whole book in the Bible that advises on lament, that talks about it. Right? Complaining is different. Complaining is really not being grateful for something. It is a dissatisfaction about a specific thing. It is finding fault in someone and pointing the finger in that person, in that situation. It's really being ungrateful. Complaining has never helped anyone in their causes. Let me tell you a few things that I have found, that I was meditating and I wrote it in my Bible, a few things that I think that I know about complaining that I would like to share with you. The first one is this: the complaining hurt our physical body. Yes, it does. Negativity hurt us, hurt our cognitive functionalities. Do you know that being negative keeps us from finding solutions to a problem, retaining knowledge. It really provides a lack of emotional balance to us. Complaining that leads to negativity hurts us physically. Complaining also distorts our thinking. It does. It leads us to see the worst in people and leads us to see the worst in our situation. Complaining makes a situation look worse than it really is. Complaining makes someone look worse than it really does, he does or she does. And you can see this in the remaining of the passage that I read for you in Numbers chapter 11. On verse 4, we read this now. The rebel that was among them had a strong craving, and the people of Israel wept again, saying, "Oh, that we had meat to eat, and remember the fish that we ate in Egypt, that cost us nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at and to eat." Well, see, here's the reality. The reality is that life for them here was better than Egypt. In Egypt, they were being beaten. They were slaves, so they have no rights. Their lives were not good lives. Therefore, they were crying out to God to take them out of that place. Now they're here, and because they're complaining, because they're negative, they're looking back saying, look how much better it was, but it really wasn't. Complaining distort our thinking. Complaining becomes a habit too, right? It becomes a habit. Complaining leads to more complaining. And more complaining leads to disruption of life. Another thing that I have observed about complaining is that complaining is unhelpful for those around us who complain. Because it doesn't provide no solutions to our problems. It does not help us to give our fellow neighbor or fellow people around us the benefit of the doubt. Let me finish by telling you this. Complaining does no good, solves no problem, rights no wrong, adds no value to anything and to anyone. Through the season of Lent, I'm committed to give up complaining. You can join me into giving up complaining, fasting complaining for Lent. And we might just find out in the end of these few weeks that we are more positive and more grateful for all the works that God has done in our lives and will continue to do. What are you giving up for Lent this season? Be blessed.